What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have another jam-packed show for you all, as we had quite a bit of upsets, such as Georgia Tech, the Yellow Jackets, putting the sting on number 2 Pitt. I could not believe they actually pulled off the upset, at Pitt, mind you. Incredible win for the Yellow Jackets, as Louisville's now all alone in first place in the ACC, but can they stay there? Also, how about Michigan? The Wolverines downing Minnesota, number 8 Minnesota. How big of a win was that for the Wolverines? And can they build off of that? We'll see. And how about the Pacific Tigers as well as the USC Trojans? And let's not forget about LSU, all full upset. Big congratulations to those teams. And how about the Redondo Molten Power Classic? Who impressed and who won the whole thing? So hand me a volleyball, set up the net, because I'm about to serve you all some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on iSports, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in on this beautiful Monday afternoon. It feels good to be back on the original time slot, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern on Monday. I felt the need to switch it up a bit because last week I was on the 3 and Out primetime face-off with my boy Larry B., and I couldn't miss that for the world. And then the previous week, I had my 2-year anniversary of Set Point, which I appreciate those that tuned in, and I appreciate those that left me questions, such as my boy Adam Karnick, who's in the chat room, on the Spreaker chat room. He says, "Good evening, Teran. Have a great show." I appreciate that, Adam. I appreciate you tuning in. And without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor is the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. Congratulations to the Warriors on a strong 44-0 victory over the Moreno Valley Mercury. The Warriors are now 4-3 on the season with 3 games remaining in the regular season. So they are above 500 and they have 3 games left. That was a big win for the Warriors as they took down the Moreno Valley Mercury for the second straight time this season. So good job to the Warriors, and I am looking forward to seeing what the Warriors can do next because I have seen them in action and they are incredible. Last I checked, they play the Riverside Kings on this Saturday, and it's going to be on the road. So imagine it's probably going to be somewhere in Riverside, which is obviously where it's at, which is where Riverside is located. But I digress. So the world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players actually have to pay in order to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get film to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or playing to stay in shape. No matter what the circumstance is, all athletes have the same goal in mind, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get the second chance you have been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on social media at SoCal Warriors. You can also follow them on Instagram at Southern California _Warriors. You can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word Southern, then California, then Warriors in the search bar. And they're all cool people. Shout out to Coach Oki, great guy, and the rest of the SoCal Warriors, they're down-to-earth people. Next up is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Fremen take care of that for you. Kit founded and has managed Background Check International Businesses since 1994, and he's here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier. This business, however, is used for professional background checks and not for the use of any crimes such as identity theft or other illegal activity. They don't have Twitter and they don't have Instagram, but they do have Facebook for all you Facebook users out there. Just type in the word background, then check, then international, then put a little dash, and then put BCI. And you can also check them on their website, www.bcint.com. So thank you to those two sponsors for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And if you want to follow IE Sports Radio, you can follow them on Twitter and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio. You could also follow them on Instagram. I just pretty much said it. You can follow them on Twitter and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio. You can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then the word sports, and then the word radio. And then you could also check out IE Sports Radio on its website by going to www.iesportsradio.com. You could check out all of our different shows. You could check out our blog site. You could check out our IE Sports Radio Hall of Fame. And you could check out all of the amazing podcasters here, because we're all a bunch of different podcasters that are by the people, for the people. Now let's get on to the volleyball action. So this segment is pretty much a segment that I pretty much came up with back in my 2-year anniversary. It's called Quick Sets. And basically I'm going to be just quickly going over the NCAA women's volleyball upsets that happened last weekend. We'll start in chronological order, as we'll start on October the 7th, where that was a Thursday. Not too many matchups that happened in terms of noteworthy matchups, except for one that happened in the West Coast Conference. This one came between number 23 Pepperdine against Pacific. Now, Pacific hasn't really been the best team all season, but they are starting to get together. They were 3-2 going into this matchup, while Pepperdine was a perfect 4-0, keeping pace with BYU, and they were also keeping pace with San Diego. Unfortunately for the Waves, Pacific was able to pull out the 5-set winner as they beat Pepperdine in 5 sets. They rallied back from a 2-1 deficit, or a 1-2 deficit, to take the win. Pacific was led by Alexa Edwards, who had 17 kills. Ramoni Cook had 14 kills, and Darina Kumanova had 12 kills. And this is a pretty underwhelming Pacific team. This team is now in 4-2 in the West Coast Conference, and they're just as capable of hanging with certain teams. They were able to defeat this impressive Pepperdine team, and they were able to win it in Stockton, California. So NorCal got the better of SoCal. Some standout stats that happened in the Pepperdine Pacific game. Pepperdine was held to a 198 hitting percentage. Pacific outdug Pepperdine 83-78. In terms of blocks, Pacific and Pepperdine were equal in blocks with 9 apiece. Service aces were pretty even, as Pacific had 1 more than Pepperdine, and despite missing 3 more than Pepperdine, they were able to run their 6-2 offense to perfection. Now, Pepperdine only had a 3-headed monster in terms of getting kills. Rachel Ahrens had 27 kills. She had a good hitting percentage in terms of .328, which is not bad. And then Grace Chillingworth, the freshman, had 14 kills, and she only had 3 hitting errors. And then after that, they didn't really have any other players in terms of double digits, as Meg Brown had 8 kills, and their next kill leader had 3 apiece. So it wasn't a good outing for Pepperdine. They have a big week this upcoming week, so I'll be talking about that in a little bit later. So let's jump on over to the next upset on Friday, October 8th, as Michigan, unranked Michigan, who I kind of sang some praises early on in the season, took down number 8 Minnesota in 5 sets, which was very impressive. Michigan was led by Jess Mruzik, who had 20 kills, and then Paige Jones and May Pertovsky had 11 kills apiece. And this was kind of an unusual match. Like, Michigan practically got outdid in more stats than not, except for service errors and surface aces. As Michigan out-aced Minnesota 8-1, and then Minnesota missed 16 serves. You cannot miss 16 serves while against Michigan. Michigan only missed 5, which was darn right impressive. Both teams had a whopping 94 digs, and both players had 5 players in double digits in terms of digs, as Hannah Grant led Michigan in digs with 23, while CeCe McGraw had 27 digs for Minnesota. So it was quite the dig fest. Despite Michigan only hitting 194, they held Minnesota to a 219 hitting percentage, and all in all, it was an impressive victory for Michigan. This is a Michigan team that has been kind of under the radar. They haven't really had too many big-time wins, but honestly, I think they're starting to show it in Big Ten conference play. Like, both teams were 3-2 after Michigan pulled the upset, and Minnesota has a little bit of work to do. Like, they're not the worst team, and they are pulling off impressive victories, and they have played a tough schedule. But you would think against a team like Michigan, they would have been able to pull out the win, and that's a little disappointing for Minnesota, just because they've kind of been underwhelming against ranked opponents, and then against this unranked Michigan team, it was a little bit underwhelming. So now let's jump on over to Sunday, this past Sunday, which was yesterday. We had 3 upsets. The first one came at the hands of USC, yes, Southern California, upsetting number 24 Colorado. Now, I use the term upset because USC hasn't really gotten too many big victories. They did beat Washington State a couple weeks ago, but they haven't had the biggest standout victories. And this was kind of my challenge to USC. I said on last week's show, I challenged USC to possibly pull out at least 1 out of 2 wins. I gave them a good shot against Colorado, not so much Utah. And believe it or not, Colorado actually lost both of their matchups to USC and UCLA. Colorado lost to UCLA in straight sets this past Friday. And USC actually played Utah rather tough. The problem was USC got swept, but most of the sets they lost were by 3 or less points. Against Colorado, USC wound up winning in 4 sets, as USC was led by Shannon Scully and Candace Denny, who each had 15 kills. Candace Denny has been quite the surprise, as she had only 19 swings, so she had 15 kills, 3 hitting errors, which was a hitting percentage of .632, while Scully had a hitting percentage of .333. Brooke Botkin and Amelia Vesca each had 11 kills, as Raquel Lazaro ran the 5-1 offense to perfection, as she had 39 assists. I'm surprised USC didn't really run a 6-2 offense, because they were kind of doing that with Mia Tuaniga, but I guess they kind of shied away from it. Either way, some standout stats that came when it came to this match. USC had a blistering 10 service aces. 5 different players had 2 aces. And despite missing 11 serves, USC also hit the ball well. They hit .265 as opposed to Colorado's .234. This was kind of another one of those matches that Colorado was kind of going to need to be aware of, just because Colorado is a good team, but USC is kind of underwhelming, and they were kind of looking for that big standout win. Colorado was led by Maya Tabron, who had 18 kills, while Jahara Campbell had 13 kills, and Megan Hart had 10 kills. Colorado only hit .234, which wasn't bad. I mean, it could have been worse, but in terms of actually scoring points on their side of the net, it didn't work out, as they only totaled 58.5 points compared to USC's 80, which is kind of underwhelming. And also, Colorado only had 3.5 blocks compared to USC's 8, which, I mean, it's not, neither team didn't really block the ball that well, hence the mid-200 stats, but it wasn't all that great. Adam Karnick also said, absolutely pouring rain by me. Hope the sun is shining out by you. Yep, it is in Southern California, so So to close the door on USC's victory over Colorado, it was a solid win for USC and a solid weekend overall, as beating Colorado was kind of the cherry on top of the weekend. And they played Utah to the best of their abilities. Unfortunately, Utah just was a little bit better. So I'll be talking about Utah in a little bit. Now, for this next little upset, we had LSU, a team that I sang praises about early on in the season, upsetting tied for number 20 Florida. Now, Florida, in my opinion, has been one of the more disappointing teams this season. I think they have been very underwhelming, and they have yet to play Kentucky. And this loss kind of also makes me wonder, is Florida actually for real? Because Florida also lost to Mississippi State. They've lost to quite a number of teams that have been either unranked or ranked below them. So I really think Florida is underachieving here. Yes, they're 11-6, but I think most of those wins are against like teams that aren't really overly impressive. The good thing about Florida's is that they split their season series against LSU, but losing to LSU does not help them out one bit, especially when they lost to them on the road. So LSU was led by Kylie DeBerg, who had 21 kills. The name sounds familiar just because she was a former Missouri player, and now she's going to be playing indoor for her graduate season, and then she's also going to be playing beach volleyball for LSU as well. So good stuff right there. LSU also had kills from Taylor Bannister, who had 15, while Sanaa Dotson had 10 kills. Some standout stats from the match is that LSU had 7 service aces compared to Florida's 5. Despite being outdug by Florida 87-79, Florida was outblocked by LSU 11-6, which was kind of big right there. As a result, Florida was held to only a hitting percentage of 176. They only had 2 players in double digits in terms of kills, as Tara Caesar had 16 kills, but she had 9 hitting errors, while Thayer Hall was probably the most efficient hitter of Florida, as she had 13 kills and only 3 hitting errors. She did take 41 swings, but she has a big arm, and she is able to get kills at will. So, again, this just kind of shows that Florida is a little, I wouldn't say overrated, but they're a little overhyped. I expected a lot better from Florida. Another stat that stood out in this match was that set 4 there were 15 ties, which almost account for half the ties overall in that 4th set. But for LSU, they pulled out a big victory. They haven't really had too many big victories just because they had COVID happening, and then they also had the hurricane that came to Louisiana. So all in all for LSU, it's good to see them getting a big win such as this, as Florida has a lot of work to do, considering if they continue to lose, then they're going to have, then first and foremost, they're not going to win the SEC. Kentucky is still beating teams left and right. Second of all, they probably won't even finish top 3 just because with how much underachieving they've been doing this season. And it's rather surprising. I didn't think they'd be this bad. But oh well, I mean, they start out with high expectations and now they've been deteriorating, so poor Florida. I feel for you, but not really, because Florida has always has high expectations. So the fact that they aren't meeting those high expectations means that they are belly flopping. All right, now let's jump to the final big upset of last weekend, as this was a huge upset. This was number 18 Georgia Tech upsetting number 2 Pitt. By the way, can I just also say this? Pitt likes to go by Pitt. They don't like to go by Pittsburgh. And also, please do not refer the women's volleyball by the term Lady Panthers. Just please don't. Do not refer to them as the Lady Panthers. Absolutely not. Anyway, just need to get that out of the way. Anyway, so for Georgia Tech, they really impressed me. They had to go on the road to Fitzgerald Fieldhouse, which hardly any team seems to win at other than Pitt. And the fact that they were able to take down the number 2 team in the nation is absolutely astounding, because Georgia Tech has already had that win over Penn State earlier in the season. But now this win over Pitt means quite a bit, as that basically puts them back into the fray of possibly winning the ACC. And it also shakes up the entire ACC, and it shook up the entire top 25 coaches poll. It also helps them because it could persuade the committee to saying that Georgia Tech deserves an at-large bid, and it also helps out their RPI. So the human cannon, Julia Bergman, led Georgia Tech in kills with 24. She hit 386, which was darn right impressive. Mariana Brambilla had 19 kills, while Aaron Moss had 11 kills, and Breland Morissette had 8 kills. And then Bianca Bertolino had 7 kills. So just got to mention that. In terms of stats that stood out to me, Pitt only had 3 service errors, yet they lost, which was kind of surprising. The digs were quite the same, as Pitt had 52 digs to Georgia Tech's 51. Both teams hit rather high hitting percentage, as Pitt had a hitting percentage of 271, while Georgia Tech had a hitting percentage of 286. Pitt was led by Chinaza Endi, who had 17 kills. She hit 406. Kayla Lund had 16 kills. She hit 333. And then Lekator member Manet had 13 kills. I believe she is a freshman, so good to see the freshman, her getting some utilization. I'm surprised Serena Gray didn't get too many scoring opportunities. She only played 4 sets, but she had 6 kills on 12 swings, which wasn't bad. All in all, both teams had 2.5 or 10.5 blocks, and it was practically an even match. Other than like the service aces and service errors, Georgia Tech had 6 aces compared to Pitt's 8, while, once again, Georgia Tech had 8 service errors compared to Pitt's 3. So it was an impressive victory for Georgia Tech, and this was a big breakout win, especially after they lost to Notre Dame last weekend. And that was kind of their trap game when they lost to Louisville as well last weekend. So Louisville is all alone in first place in the ACC, which is big. And that's going to do it for the upsets. Some noteworthy matchups or noteworthy scores that happened last weekend consisted of, going back to Thursday, Georgia sweeping Texas A&M at Texas A&M. Now, Georgia is not one of the more impressive teams from the SEC, and Texas A&M was coming off of a big-time victory over Tennessee, but Texas A&M underachieved in this match. I was very surprised to see Georgia actually getting the better of Texas A&M, in straight sets, mind you. Looking at this matchup, Georgia did not do... I mean, they weren't bad in terms of statistics, but the thing that stood out to me was that Georgia had 6 service aces, while Texas A&M had a whopping none. And Georgia was led by Phoebe Awolai, who had 10 kills. I probably mispronounced that name, but I digress. She was probably the most efficient hitter of the team, as she had a hitting percentage of 571. She only needed 14 swings, so it's quite fascinating right there. Texas A&M hit 44 on the match. That is not a good hitting percentage. Absolutely dreadful. And then Georgia only hit 153, but, it wasn't that big of a deal, especially when you're holding the other team to only 44, which is quite impressive. Texas A&M was led by Morgan Christon, who had 10 kills. Those two, being Christon and Phoebe, were the only 2 players in double digits in terms of kills. So I wouldn't call this an upset. I mean, obviously it's an upset in terms of records, but I don't know. Texas A&M strikes me as the team that underachieves quite a bit. Every time they get a big-time win, they always follow that up with a head-scratching loss. And that's not because Texas A&M is bad. I think Texas A&M is a solid team. My thing for Texas A&M is that they can't beat the big girl teams. And they also have a tough time staying consistent. I get they're not as good as 2019's team, but I'll also say this. Texas A&M has to face a lot of stiff competition, and I feel they also look ahead. I feel they get a big head whenever they have a big-time victory. and I think that was kind of the case. I will say this about Texas A&M. They did bounce back in a dramatic fashion as they beat Georgia in 5 sets this past weekend. So Texas A&M still has a lot of work to do in order to be considered a at-large NCAA tournament team, because a lot of teams are vying for the at-large bids. Unless they can win the SEC, which I don't think they will. I really don't think they will, because they have 2 losses already. Kentucky has none. End of discussion. Speaking of teams from Texas, number 1 Texas. They had a little bit of trouble against Kansas, as Kansas had them on the ropes. They were up 2-0 in the match, and then Texas won the 3rd set, then won the 4th set, and then just barely inched out of that 5th set. Except Texas didn't even trail that 5th set. There were 5 ties, but Texas was able to grind out the victory and stay undefeated by taking down Kansas via reverse sweep fashion. I had no doubt Texas was going to win. I was a little surprised to see them down 0-2, and I'm like, this isn't like Texas. Like, what's going on? Skylar Fields had herself a game as she had 26 kills. Logan Eggleston had 18 kills. And then Asia O'Neal had 12 kills. Texas as a whole hit 312, which was quite impressive. They progressively got better. The first set, they only hit 138. Second was 238. Third set, they hit a blistering 548. Then they hit 324 in sets 4 and 5. Kansas was led by Caroline Bien, who had 21 kills, while Caroline Crawford and Jenny Mosser had 12 kills apiece. Rachel Langs had 10 kills for Kansas, who hit 287 on the match. Kansas runs a 6-2 offense, which is impressive. Elise McGee and Cameron Turner both supplied assists for Kansas, while Texas was running their 5-1 offense with Jenna Gabriel. Texas outdug Kansas 74-64 as Eggleston totaled 20 digs. She almost had that 2020 game. Imagine if that would have happened. Woo, Nelani Osea had 17 kills. 17 digs. I heard Nelani's last name is not pronounced Eosea or Iasia. I think it's pronounced Osea. So if I'm mispronouncing that, still, I'm sorry. Sydney Peterson also chipped in 14 digs, and Jenna Gabriel chipped in 13 digs. Kansas only had 2 players in terms of double digits in terms of digs, as Lacey Angelo and Mosser had 18 and 15 digs respectively. Texas did miss 15 serves compared to Kansas's 9, but Texas also had 7 service aces compared to Kansas's 5. And in terms of blocks, Kansas outblocked Texas quite a bit. They outblocked them 8-4, which is quite impressive. Texas has a tall team. You would think Texas would have outblocked them tenfold, but I guess that wasn't meant to be. Just like how Texas was unable to fall to Kansas, as Kansas fell short of the upset. It would have been a big-time upset for the Jayhawks, but fortunately, Rock Chalk got erased. And then also, Texas swept Kansas in the second meeting, which was no surprise. And then lastly, we have this little matchup. We have UCLA sweeping Utah. Now, UCLA was number 16 in last week's coaches poll. Utah was number 15. This, to me, is no upset. This, to me, is not an upset by any means. Just because UCLA is very talented, and the thing about UCLA compared to Utah is that they stay consistent. They've only lost 2 matches going into that match against Utah, and their only losses came in 5-set matches. The first one being against San Diego, which San Diego is a good team. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt against that. And then their second loss came against Washington, in which they got reverse swept. And once again, Washington is a very good team. You can't take that away from the Huskies. Utah, on the other hand, they were impressive starting out. They had that 5-set win over number 3 Nebraska on the road. But then they kind of fell off. They were a little inconsistent, as they lost to Boise State after their win against Nebraska. And they also lost to BYU in the Holy War. Then in the Rumble in the Rockies, which was their second Pac-12 game, they lost to Colorado a couple days after they defeated Washington in 5 sets, and then they lost to UCLA. And keep in mind, Utah did not have the easiest outing against USC. They didn't blow them out in every set. This just goes to show you that USC is just as good. They can hang with some of the teams in the Pac-12. And then I just don't think Utah is up there in terms of that high level of competition. They're a good team, don't get me wrong. But their problem is that they bank on Danny Drews quite a bit. She had 16 kills. She was the only player in double digits in terms of kills for Utah, as she almost had half of Utah's overall kills. Utah as a whole had 35 kills. Well, and like I said, 16 of them went to Danny Drews. As a team, Utah only hit 167, which is not good. That's not going to get it done. Zoe Wetherington and Madeline Robinson each had 8 kills, which I guess was good, but still, Danny Drews cannot carry the team. She did hit 286, which is impressive. She was probably the most efficient hitter as well as Wetherington, but it wasn't enough. UCLA, on the other hand, was led by Charity Looper, who had 20 kills, and that is a refreshing sight to see. Yes, she is getting most of the load, but she's taking most of the load off of Mac May. Mac May, when UCLA had to take on Washington State, she had 39 kills as she pretty much willed UCLA past Washington State in a 5-set thriller. And UCLA kind of knows this. They can't bank on Mac May. And she also had 30 kills against San Diego, which they wound up losing. UCLA knows they got to get other players involved. And while Charity Looper and Mac May were the only 2 players that led the team in kills, as there weren't any other double-digit kill leaders for UCLA, they do spread the wealth quite a bit. Elon McCall and Francesca Alupe had 4 kills, and then Anna Dodson added 3 kills of her own, and then Shelby Martin has done an outstanding job distributing the ball, and then Zoe Fleck is also Zoe Fleck. Some standout stats from that match: UCLA aced Utah 8-2. They out-aced them 8-2. UCLA outdug Utah 50-37. UCLA out-hit Utah 337-167. And all in all, other than blocks, UCLA just outdid Utah in practically everything. This is kind of the difference between Utah and UCLA. I think UCLA is a much more consistent team on a nightly basis, and they have quite a number of talent, not just in terms of Mac May, but in terms of Charity Looper and then Zoe Fleck, who has done an outstanding job digging the ball. And Elon McCall also chipped in 12 digs as well, so I got to make note of that. So, all in all, for UCLA, they're not going anywhere. I think Mike Sealy has done an outstanding job making the adjustments and figuring out what the team needs to do in order to have success in the Pac-12, because he said it best back when his team won the Long Beach State tournament. There are a lot of good teams in the Pac-12, and it was too early to tell who's good and who's not. So, all in all, for UCLA, I ain't even worried about them falling off one bit. I think they are proving themselves quite nicely. They still have a little ways to go in order to clinch that Pac-12 championship. But all in all, I like their chances of winning the Pac-12. And I think they can hang with Washington. They just have to make sure they distribute the offense quite a bit. Alright, so that's going to do it for last weekend's matchups in terms of noteworthy scores and the big-time upsets. Let's jump on over to the AVCA Division I Coaches Poll. Then we'll take ourselves a quick break and prepare ourselves for the second half of this show, because we have quite a bit of a second half to go over. So, in terms of the Coaches Poll, start with 25 to 21. 25 is Washington State, which checks in after quite a good number of wins, and despite Colorado getting moved out. 24 is Pepperdine, despite their loss to Pacific. 23 is Florida, despite their loss to LSU. 22 is San Diego. 21 is Tennessee. And then 20 through 16 consists of 20 being Western Kentucky, 19 being Creighton, 18 being Stanford, 17 being Utah, and 16 being Georgia Tech. 15 through 11 consists of Penn State at 15, UCLA at 14, Oregon at 13, Minnesota at 12, and Baylor at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Washington at 10, Nebraska at 9, BYU at 8, Ohio State at 7, and Purdue at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Kentucky at 5, Pitt at 4, Wisconsin at 3, Louisville at 2, and your number one team in the nation for the umpteenth time is... you already know this one. Texas. So, something I missed this past weekend was Creighton defeating Marquette in the Big East Conference play. Now, this was a huge win for Creighton. Creighton needed a big-time win after they lost to St. John's. Granted, St. John's is a relatively under-the-radar team. So Creighton defeated Marquette in 4 sets, and I want to say the match was at Creighton. I'm going to just confirm this. I'm just going to double-check this matchup right here. Yeah, it was at Creighton, so it was a good bounce-back win for Creighton, considering Marquette was undefeated in the Big East Conference, and those two are basically number 1 and number 2 in the Big East. It's either Marquette wins the conference or Creighton wins the conference. So it was a big win for Creighton defeating their big-time rival Marquette, and they couldn't have asked for a much better game, considering they needed that, because now, with Marquette losing, there is a tie amongst the Big East Conference between them and Marquette. The win was also huge for Creighton, as it was also the 400th victory for Kirsten Booth, as she collected her 400th win at Creighton. As that was a big win, as Creighton was able to defeat Marquette in 4 sets, which was big time right there. I was very impressed with Creighton and how they were able to handle last week's loss. The first 2 sets, Creighton were able to take them. The second set was actually quite tight, as Creighton had to win that 28-26. Then Marquette won the third set 25-19, but then Creighton just stormed past Marquette as they were able to win that fourth set 25-16. So the Blue Jays are in first place with the Golden Eagles. I think this is going to be a barn burner between those two. And then don't sleep on St. John's. Like, St. John's could possibly pull another win out of their hat, but we'll have to see. But all in all, it was an impressive victory for Creighton, and I think they are still on the up and up. They still have a little ways to go, but honestly, I think they're looking impressive. And then one last matchup I forgot to make note of that happened last weekend was then number 14 Oregon defeating number 17 Stanford in 5 sets. I will just quickly skim through that matchup. I totally forgot to print it out as a part of my noteworthy matchups that happened last weekend. So Oregon defeated Stanford at the Matthew Knight Arena in 5 sets. They never trailed in that 5th set, and there was only one tie. That just goes to show you how talented Oregon is, as they had 3 players in terms of double digits in terms of kills, as Brooke Nuneviller had 22 kills, Taylor Borup had 19 kills, and Morgan Lewis had 10 kills. Some noteworthy stats included Stanford missing 11 serves, which is a big fat no-no. You cannot miss 11 serves against Oregon. You just can't. The good thing about Stanford was that they outblocked Oregon 20-12. That's rather impressive. But Oregon outdug Stanford 89-73, and they only held Stanford to a 172 hitting percentage, which is quite impressive. They even held Katie Baird to only a hitting percentage of 22, and they held Sammy Francis to 137 in terms of a hitting percentage. Fortunately for Stanford, they were able to get kill productions from Kendall Kipp and Holly Campbell, but unfortunately it wasn't enough, as those players I mentioned, Sammy Francis, Katie Baird, Kendall Kipp, and Holly Campbell, all had double digits in terms of kills, but it wasn't enough to take down Oregon, as Oregon hit 204, but they had more kills. They had 71 kills to Stanford's 55, which, in my opinion, isn't really the biggest standout stat right there, but as long as you're scoring points at will, you're doing everything correct. I'm still surprised that Stanford missed 11 serves. That's not really like them, but some of their players' serves are either hit or miss. Katie Baird, I will say, she served the ball quite well. She had 4 service aces, so good job on her part. It's just that Oregon had a little bit more pop, as it was a huge win for Oregon that keeps them atop the Pac-12 standings with UCLA. And I think this Pac-12 race is going to be quite interesting. I think this Pac-12 race could come down to the final week, and it could come down to some key matchups. And then one more Pac-12 score to note is that Washington had to go 5 with Arizona State, but they were able to pull out the win in 5 sets. Now, Washington should be very fortunate they didn't lose that matchup, because if they did, that would have been detrimental to their hopes of possibly claiming the Pac-12, because they've already got a couple losses under their belt against Washington State and Utah. They cannot afford any more losses at this point, because if they do, then they can kiss the Pac-12 championship goodbye. I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing that would happen to them, but it wouldn't be the best thing for them to not win the Pac-12, because they wouldn't get a higher seeding. So for Washington, they're currently 4-2. They are still a game behind UCLA and Oregon, as the two actually play this week. I'll be talking about that in a little bit, but again, you look at Washington, they also had to go 5 sets with Montana State, which that was a close one. They could have easily lost to Montana State, but fortunately they had a bit of comeback magic left in their bag. So for Washington, they still have a lot to work on, but they're starting to get better. And then Washington, like I said, they play Oregon this week. I'll be getting into that a little bit later. But to close the book on this week, it wasn't as eventful as last week or the week before. But for this week, it was an eventful week in terms of upsets. I'm not going to count UCLA and Utah. I will say that UCLA and Utah are practically evenly matched. The difference is between Utah and UCLA is that UCLA is a lot more consistent. Again, UCLA's losses are to 5 setters. It's not like they got swept by Washington and San Diego. I'll give them that the Washington loss, they could have probably won that one. The same thing with San Diego, but UCLA they still have it in them. They don't skip a beat. So we'll see if UCLA can hang on to their top spot in the Pac-12, as UCLA plays the Arizona schools this weekend, while Washington plays at the Oregon schools this weekend. So, and then UCLA is actually playing at the Arizona schools. So there's that. But that is going to do it for the recap of last week's noteworthy scores. Let's take ourselves a quick little break. When we come back, we shall have a recap or a preview of this week's noteworthy matches and sneaky good matches. We'll also have a recap of the Redondo Molten Classic. Yeah, the Redondo Molten Varsity Power Classic that happened this past weekend in Redondo Beach. You'll have to find out how it went, as we'll be taking ourselves a quick break. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' to NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point. You can check out all of our amazing shows right here on IE Sports Radio. We have a plethora of amazing shows, not just dedicated to certain sports, but dedicated to certain cities and different regions of the entire world. As we have Gina G with Reppin' to NorCal Sports, which talks about Northern California sports, and it might even talk a little about Stanford volleyball. You also have Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karnick, who does a fantastic job talking about Chicago sports. You also have other shows such as 3 and Out with Larry B, which talks about football, such as the NFL, 3 and Out College Edition with myself and Larry B. You also have the Yins Report, which talks about Pittsburgh sports and whatnot. We have a lot of shows, and I mean we have a lot of shows. So let's jump on back into segment number 2 of Set Point. So we're actually going to veer to the high school portion of this show, as we actually had a big-time tournament that happened in the beautiful state of California, as we had the Redondo Molten Power Classic. So it was a varsity tournament, and it was a big-time tournament. Like, it was quite the fun tournament. I didn't go there for day number 1, but I was there for day number 2. I spent 6 hours there. The first match of the knockout round started at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, and then the final matchup started at, I think 2:30, maybe 3. Regardless, it was a fun little tournament, and this basically was the final dress rehearsal for all the California teams in Southern California from the Southern section, as there were a lot of talented teams, not only in the state of California, but nationally ranked as well. The only non-California team that participated was Bishop Gorman of Nevada, which that team is always good year in and year out. That's a freaking good team. But the champion of the tournament was Cathedral Catholic, the number 1 overall seed of the tournament, as they defeated Miracosta in the final 25-23 and 25-18. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay for the final just because I needed to get home ASAP, and more importantly, I had a lot going on my dish when it came to that day, and also I was pretty gassed. So the The top 16 of the tournament consisted of Cathedral Catholic, Long Beach Poly, Redondo Union, Clovis West, Bishop Gorman, La Costa Canyon, South Torrance, Harvard Westlake, Palos Verdes, Oxnard, Newport Harbor, Notre Dame of Sherman Oaks, Marlborough, I think that's how it's pronounced. I think it's pronounced Marlborough, Torrey Pines, Bishop Montgomery, and Mira Costa. Now, one team I was obviously fixated on, and this is kind of, for those of you that follow my main Twitter account at Teran Rodriguez 1, I was mainly fixated on Newport Harbor just because that's my alma mater, and I was fascinated on how they'll do in this tournament, just because they don't really participate in this big, tough tournament. Newport Harbor actually performed quite well. They finished tied for third in the tournament. Like, they didn't have a bronze medal match, which I understand why, because no one wants to play a bronze medal match. Alright? Like, honestly, I don't think anyone would pay to play if I were a coach, you wouldn't pay me to play a bronze medal match. Like, that is the biggest waste of a match ever. I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but especially when the playoffs are so close, you don't want to risk your players getting injured. So that's why I thought that third place matchups should not be in volleyball tournaments, especially that close to the end of the season. So now, if it were the beginning of the season, I would understand, but still. So, back to Newport Harbor. They really impressed me. They're not one of the more nationally ranked teams, but they have been on a tear lately. They're in the southern section of Division 3, but they were beating teams that were ranked higher than them in California. They took down Torrey Pines in pool play, which was very impressive. Torrey Pines is not one of the more easier teams. They're always a great team in Southern California, mainly in the San Diego section. So, honestly, for Newport Harbor to pull off a victory that big over Torrey Pines, and I don't even remember the last time Newport even beat Torrey Pines, it speaks to high volumes of how good they pretty much are. And then they also beat Palos Verdes, which was one of the better teams in its league, and one of the better teams in its Division 1 and 2. So, for me, those were two big victories, and they hung tough with Mira Costa. They took the first set 25-21, but then the second set, Mira Costa woke up and won that set. And then the third set, I basically said it on Twitter, the clock struck midnight for Newport Harbor as Mira Costa just outdid them in everything. They outserved them, they outhit them, they outpassed them, they out-everything them. So, all in all, it was still a successful tournament for Newport Harbor. I think that was the team that overachieved. And then Mira Costa was also just as good, just because Mira Costa, they're well known for volleyball, and they were the number 5 seed overall. So the fact that they were able to win this tournament as the number 5 seed was also speaking to high volumes of how good they truly were. So good job to Mira Costa. One player that I had kind of my eye on in terms of how this person would do was Charlie Furbringer. Now, she is only a freshman. She's a setter, but if you know that last name, Furbringer, she's actually the daughter of Joy Mackenzie Furbringer and Matt Furbringer, the head coach and assistant coach of Long Beach State women's volleyball. So that was quite impressive. She looked like she could be setting in college. She's only a freshman in high school, and she was just phenomenal. One of my buddies said that she has been recruited in club volleyball, and for good reason too. She is phenomenal. If I walked in and I was like, what grade is she in? And I didn't know who she was prior, I would have guessed she was probably a junior or a senior. But her being a freshman and her making big time plays is absolutely scary for the near future for opposing teams that have to face Mira Costa. It's quite funny. And then she also earned all-tournament honors at the Durango tournament. And that is a huge deal, just because, again, freshman and Durango is a national tournament, not just for, California teams, but for teams all over the world. It's quite amazing. So, all in all, for Miracosta, they are going to be a team to watch for. They just did not have enough in the tank to take down Cathedral Catholic. Now, Cathedral Catholic actually had to survive against Harvard Westlake. Harvard Westlake was another team that I thought overachieved in this tournament. I thought they did a phenomenal job in this tournament as they made it all the way to the semifinals, just only to lose to Cathedral Catholic. So, to me, Harvard Westlake, they're kind of like second banana in the Mission League behind Marymount, which has yet to lose a match. And that's the number one team in the nation right there. Number one team in the nation, number one team in Southern California, number one team in California overall. That Marymount team is really good. But back to Harvard Westlake, this is a team that I think can do damage in the playoffs. I have them as kind of a dark horse team. I don't know if they'll be able to stack up with Mater Dei or Lakewood or Miracosta, but I think Harvard Westlake has something that most people don't, and that's grit and resilience. I think most people don't have them on their radar, and now, after this tournament, more people are going to say, okay, I guess Harvard Westlake is a good team, so we got to put them on our radar. So, for Harvard Westlake, I think it was quite a special tournament for them, especially since they defeated Bishop Gorman. That team is never an easy team to beat. So, good job to Harvard Westlake. Now, I don't really mean to say this as in a negative fashion, but I think a team that underachieved, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, a couple teams that I thought underachieved were La Costa Canyon and Torrey Pines. Now, Torrey Pines is rather the biggest surprise just because they got swept in their quarterfinal matchup by Miracosta. Yes, Miracosta is good, but to me, I thought Torrey Pines was a little better than that. I kind of felt that they struggled. Oh, obviously they struggled against Newport Harbor. They lost to them. But the fact that they lost in straight sets to Costa kind of speaks to how this is might be one of their down years. I think maybe Torrey Pines might be a little down because of COVID and whatnot, but I didn't think they'd lose in straight sets to Costa. I mean, Costa's a good team, but I just didn't think that they would lose that early. I thought they would lose in the semifinals. And if they got a chance in the semifinals, they would have had another shot at Newport Harbor, which would have been phenomenal for them, but unfortunately they didn't, and I think they kind of underachieved. And then La Costa Canyon, I thought they were a little bit better. I don't think they underachieved, but I thought them losing to Bishop Gorman was a little surprising, but then again, Bishop Gorman is in Nevada, and then La Costa Canyon is in San Diego. So, for La Costa Canyon, I don't think they vastly underachieved like Torrey Pines did, but I think La Costa Canyon, I think they could have done better, but this is a tough tournament, so I'll give them a slight pass. I'll give them a slight underachievement. But I think they get a pass for this weekend. I think they'll be just fine. A team that I thought showed a little bit of flash was Long Beach Poly. They're starting to get healthy because a few of their players, both of which had committed to USC, were out to start the year, and now I think they're back and better than ever. I think one of them at least is back. I don't think the other is back, but regardless, Long Beach Poly will be a tough out in the CIF playoffs. Even if they don't get into the Division I bracket, I think they're going to be a tough out in Division II. That's going to be a scary matchup. No one's going to want to face Long Beach Poly. No one. And then Redondo Union, they didn't underachieve. I thought to me they were resilient. Now, the reason I make note of Redondo Union is because they are a good team. They're a very good team. However, their best player, Mele Koroblagovic, I probably mispronounced the last name, but Mele is out with a stress fracture in her foot, which is not good. Not good indeed for Redondo Union. With her out, everyone else has to step up. I will say this about Redondo Union. I still think they're going to be a tough out, but I thought they should have won that match against Clovis West. I think one of their kills against Clovis West, and this isn't to take anything away from Clovis West, they were up 14 12, and then their middle blocker put down a kill, and then it looked as if it was ruled in, and then the head referee was kind of made a delayed decision, thinking that it was in or if it was out, and then he said it was out, and then every Redondo Union fan was pretty irate. They were not pleased at the call. And it really was a heartbreaking loss for them. They were actually up 14-11, and then they allowed 5 straight points, which was very heartbreaking. And to lose in that fashion is like a punch to the gut. No one deserves to lose in that fashion. And this kind of makes me wonder if high school volleyball will eventually have instant replay implemented. I think that's still a little over the top. It's I don't even think all NCAA colleges have instant replay installed. Some do, some don't. Some sometimes have instant replay installed, and sometimes colleges don't have instant replay installed. But that's kind of the Redondo Union call where that ball was out, where I think most of us thought it was in, is going to be the instance of, I think, high school volleyball could receive instant replay in the near future. So we'll see if that'll happen, but you also have to factor in gym size and if the entire gymnasium will be able to have instant replay, and what are they going to do in terms of having instant replay? Are they going to have a drone up in the air filming the action and whatnot? So it's just a little food for thought on my part. But that's going to do it for the high school volleyball portion of the show. All in all, it was a fun little tournament, and I thought there were a lot of good competitive teams, and I think that this tournament is going to help everyone when it comes to their respective playoffs, whether it's in San Diego, whether it's in Nevada, or whether it's in the southern section. So that'll close the book for the high school volleyball portion of the show. Now let's get on into some noteworthy Week 8 NCAA women's volleyball matches to watch for. So there are none on Wednesday, even though I accidentally printed it out and I forgot to take out the Wednesday part, but c'est la vie. So on Thursday, we have 4 noteworthy matches for this week, and this will be the last part of the show. Then I'll let you all go on your way, because for those that are listening on the playback, you probably have something else to do. For those listening live, you are probably wanting to watch some Monday Night Football. Anyway, so Thursday night's noteworthy matchups include, and is the headline, number 10 Washington taking on number 13 Oregon. This is going to be a fun little matchup. This is a huge test for Washington, as they are winners of 4 straight, but they now need to prove if they could take down this tough Oregon team. If they do, then more power to them, and then Oregon will be knocked out of first place. But if Oregon wins, they'll stay in first place, which I think that'll be a great testament to this little rivalry. This is kind of a Northwest Territory rivalry. And speaking of Northwest Territory, check out Northwest Territory Sports with Brad Buckingham every Sunday at noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern. It's a nice little power hour. Great way to start the week if you're a diehard IE Sports Radio fan. So yeah, definitely tune into that. But back to Washington, Oregon. This is a very tough matchup to predict. I'm actually not going to even predict this matchup. I think it's going to be a all-out dogfight between Washington and Oregon. I think this is going to be a fun matchup, and I expect a lot of kills to be spiked down. I think the matchup will be Washington's high-powered offense versus Oregon being a great defensive team, whether it's digging the ball or blocking the ball. And then another ranked-on-ranked matchup is number 22 San Diego at number 24 Pepperdine. It's a nice little SoCal matchup right here. And Pepperdine, coming off of that loss against Pacific, even though they defeated St. Mary's, is still in the top 25. San Diego also had a bit of a slip-up earlier in the non-conference season. This is kind of a big test for Pepperdine. If Pepperdine can beat San Diego, I think they will move one step closer to winning the West Coast Conference, because you could still win your conference, and that was proven with BYU last year. But for Pepperdine, they're kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of wins and losses. I also should make note that Pepperdine lost on the birthday of Steve Astor. That really broke my heart. I even said on Twitter, we got to go get that win for Steve Astor. It's his birthday today. Unfortunately, Pepperdine didn't win, and unfortunately, Pepperdine, they didn't even make note of his birthday. I'm heartbroken. But San Diego also has a big test. They're currently atop of the West Coast Conference standings with BYU, and San Diego definitely needs to win this one just because they have another big test. This could also be a trap game because San Diego does have BYU on the horizon. So San Diego cannot look ahead because last year San Diego looked ahead and they lost to LMU, then they lost to BYU twice, and then they lost to Pepperdine, and they made me think that San Diego was not a good NCAA team and that they were overrated, or, well, not overrated, but underachieving. So there's that. Staying on the West Coast Conference, we have number 8 BYU at LMU. Now, LMU is kind of a potential trap game. They've faced some good competition. LMU isn't really the best team in the West Coast Conference, and I don't think they're that good just because, you know, they haven't really pulled out that standout-ish victory. The surprising thing about LMU, however, is that they're 14-2. They're also 5-1 in conference play, as their only loss was to Pepperdine, but they debatably could have won that game. They were up 13-10 in the final set, and then Pepperdine reeled off 5 in a row. And that was also the PCH Cup. So this LMU team could potentially, and I say potentially loosely, they could have their way with BYU. But BYU is one of the more outstanding teams. That team is overachieving, and that team hasn't really lost a whole lot. Their only loss was to Pitt, which we have all established that Pitt is a legit team. So for LMU, they need to, if they want to make a statement, I think this would be a big-time matchup to make a statement in. And both their matches are at home for this weekend, which I'll be getting into the second matchup in a little bit. But they don't really have that big standout-ish victory that says, oh, LMU is a legit team. I mean, their best win is probably Kansas, which was receiving votes in the Purdue tournament. And then they also took a set off of Purdue, but nothing too special for LMU. Like, 14-2, their best win was against, whatchamacallit, was against Kansas. Not too special. Though Kansas is a Power 5 school, and they did take number 1 Texas to 5 sets, but still. LMU is facing 2 ranked opponents, and this is their chance to, pounce on one of those 2 ranked opponents, because their overall record is impressive. 14-2 at this point of the season is rather good. LMU is having a much better season than they did last year. And I think the West Coast Conference is still up for grabs, other than BYU, of course. I think BYU is proving that they are the favorite. But to me, I think LMU has a chance. They just have to play to their competition. And then the last matchup, now that we mentioned Kansas, is the noteworthy matchup on Thursday is Kansas at number 11 Baylor. So Kansas, as we all know, they took Texas to 5 sets in the first go-around. Baylor, coincidentally, actually lost a Big 12 matchup to Texas Tech last weekend. Well, not this past weekend, but a couple weeks ago. But for Baylor, I'd be careful with Kansas. I think Kansas is more than capable of hanging with most of the Big 12. I don't think Kansas will win, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas hung tough with Baylor. You never know with Baylor, though. Sometimes there'll be this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde team. For example, they do have some great players. They have Yassiana Presley, Avery Skinner, just a bunch of talent on that team. The problem is that sometimes they're a little inconsistent. But they do have some like I said, they are a very good team, and I would not be surprised to see Baylor winning both matchups. The two teams between the Jayhawks and the Bears face each other on Thursday, and then they face each other on Friday. So I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor were to have a little trouble with Kansas, but I would be nowhere near surprised if Baylor won. And the only thing I'd be surprised is if Kansas actually won or if Baylor won in strong and dominating fashion. So then on the 15th, this Friday, the big-time matchup is number 6 Purdue at number 7 Ohio State. This is a huge matchup in the Big Ten as Ohio State is going to look to try to get back on track as they face Purdue for a second time. Purdue actually beat Ohio State, and Purdue is coming off of that big 5-set victory from last week against Illinois, as they still control their fate in the Big Ten. It's just that Ohio State is hungry for a win against Purdue. It seems like Purdue has the number of Ohio State, as Ohio State is still doing good. They're nowhere near not good, but I will say this about Purdue. I would be careful with Ohio State just because Ohio State can get rocking sometimes. So we'll see what happens. But all in all, for Ohio State-Purdue, this is going to be a barn burner. Top 10 matchup right here. I would not be surprised if Ohio State and Purdue went 5 sets. I think that has the potential to go 5 sets. I really think it does. So Purdue-Ohio State is definitely a matchup to watch for. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a bunch of thunderous kills and just a bunch of great gameplay between those Big Ten schools. It's going to be a fun little matchup as Purdue is going to get quite the test this weekend. You'll see with the second matchup. And then also on Friday we have in the Pac-12, number 17 Utah at number 18 Stanford. This is another matchup where these two are practically evenly matched. Stanford coming off of a 5-set loss to Oregon, while Utah coming off of a straight sets loss to UCLA. I don't know what to expect here with this matchup. I think Stanford will take it, but for Utah, this is kind of their gut check match because if they lose this one, winning the Pac-12 will be a little bit tougher, and they'll be a lot further behind Washington and Oregon and UCLA and whatnot. So for Utah, this is kind of their prove me wrong matchup. Because, again, I'd put money on Stanford when it comes to this match, but I'm not a gambling man. So let's jump to Saturday. So this Saturday, this is kind of an underwhelming matchup. We have number 3 Wisconsin at Michigan. Michigan coming off of that big 5-set win over Minnesota last week. To me, I think Wisconsin should be able to handle Michigan. I wouldn't be too surprised if Michigan showed some grit and resilience against Wisconsin. But for me, I think Wisconsin handles this one quite nicely. Obviously, they will not have Grace Loberg as she is out for the season. But for Wisconsin, I think they have a lot of great options, such as Dana Redkey and Anna Smrek, who has done a phenomenal job filling in for Grace Loberg. So all in all, for Wisconsin, I think they should win, but don't underestimate Michigan. Otherwise, they could wind up on the wrong side of the score, just like Minnesota did. And Michigan has some stud players. I think they returned most of, if not all, their players from last year. Because last year they had a bunch of juniors and sophomores. And now I think most of those juniors or sophomores are now seniors and juniors. And then they've obviously got their underclassmen coming as well. Or their underclassmen that came as well. So we'll see what happens. So, all in all, for Wisconsin, I think they should win this one. So another noteworthy matchup going back to the West Coast Conference is number 22 San Diego at LMU. Again, I think this is a potential trap game for the Toreros. I think the Toreros need to be careful with this matchup just because last year when they faced LMU, they wound up losing, and I kind of fear they looked ahead when it came to that matchup against LMU and then BYU. This has the potential of a trap game because after they play LMU, next week they are hitting the road to take on BYU at Provo. So they got to be careful here. They have to take care of business at LMU. This is kind of a rivalry matchup. It's an interstate rival matchup. It's an inter-conference. Well, not an inter-conference matchup, but it's whatever. So regardless, I think this is going to be a fun little matchup between San Diego and LMU. Don't sleep on LMU. Once again, don't sleep on LMU. That is a good team. They hung tough with Pepperdine. I would not be surprised if they push San Diego to the brink. So we'll see what happens yeah. And then speaking of the West Coast Conference and speaking of big-time matchups, we have number 8 BYU at number 24 Pepperdine. Oh my goodness. When I see the words number 8 and number 24 together, I obviously think of Kobe Bryant. It was fate that Pepperdine was 24 and BYU was 8, wasn't it? But for BYU and Pepperdine, this is going to be a fun matchup. I think BYU is much better than last year. Last year, BYU had a bunch of freshmen and a bunch of sophomores and very few juniors and seniors. Now those freshmen and sophomores are a little bit grown up, and then the juniors are still on this team. So I think, and then they also have other talented players as well on their team, as they got a bunch of players due to transfers. So for BYU, I'm not promising they'll win, but this could be a trap game just because they have San Diego on the horizon. For Pepperdine, they have the luxury of playing at the Stonehouse, a.k.a. their gymnasium, a.k.a. Pepperdine, a.k.a. Malibu. I think Pepperdine can give BYU a run for their money. I don't know if BYU can win. Or, I'm sorry, I don't know if Pepperdine can win. I think BYU is a very good team. They have Kenzie Kerber, who has done a fantastic job as she transferred from Utah to BYU. So, for me, I think Pepperdine can give them a battle. I don't want to say Pepperdine will win just because, or I don't want to say Pepperdine will lose just because I think I'm going to get proven wrong, or I might make this as bulletin board material. I'm just saying that this is going to be a fantastic matchup between BYU and Pepperdine. This is the battle of two ranked teams that are not from Power 5 conferences. And the same can be said for San Diego versus Pepperdine. So, all in all, this will be a fun matchup. And then also, again, if LMU manages to pull a win, don't be surprised if they move into the top 25 coaches poll, or they receive votes. I'll keep an eye on LMU as well. I'm definitely keeping tabs on San Diego, Pepperdine, and BYU, but I also got to keep a sharp eye out for them Lions. Alright, so now let's jump on into Sunday's matchups. We only have 2 noteworthy Sunday matchups. The first one being Washington State at Oregon. It's going to be a fun matchup right here. Washington State, number 25, is now ranked for the first time since they were ranked to start the season. Washington State has obviously played a tough non-conference schedule, and then they had that long winning streak until USC had other plans to derail it. Now they are playing Oregon this weekend. I think Washington State has the potential to knock off Oregon, but I think Oregon is just too good. They are playing at Matthew Knight Arena in Eugene, Oregon. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon won, but don't sleep on the Cougars. I think that team has a lot of upside to them. I think they are over their 5-set loss to UCLA. I think Washington State had the potential to win that, but unfortunately they fell short. So I think Washington State has to make up for lost ground, especially if they're going to win a tough Pac-12 conference. The Pac-12 is kind of wide open. No team is going to go undefeated, that's for sure. That's a given right there. No team is going undefeated in the Pac-12. So if Washington State wants to move up higher in the rankings, they're going to need to start pulling off some upsets. And they also need to take care of business when it comes to some of these other teams. I know the USC loss wasn't good, but USC is an underwhelming team. I think USC is underrated in my opinion. They didn't start off ranked. They were close to being ranked, and then they kind of fell off, and now they're trying to play catch-up. And then Washington State was unranked, and now they've caught up. So we'll have to see. But you have to respect what Washington State has done. They started the season 0-4, but now they are above 500, and they are looking like a lean, mean Pac-12 machine. And then staying in the Pac-12 conference and concluding the noteworthy matches for this weekend is number 24 Colorado at number 17 Stanford. So this is Colorado's chance to prove that they can get back into the top 25 possibly. For Colorado, they're leaning toward not being deserving in terms of being ranked versus being deserved of being ranked. But all in all, for Colorado, I think that they have potential, but against Stanford, I don't see them winning. Now, knowing my luck, Colorado will probably win, and I'll be eating a lot of crow on next Monday. But for Colorado, don't sleep on the Buffs. Like, they have some potential. It's just that they're going to be playing a lot of stiff competition, and then losing to USC did not help their matters. Granted, their matchup against USC wasn't an ugly matchup, and granted, they did have to play on the road, but you're a ranked team. You got to prove yourself week in and week out. And you got to be aware of every challenge that gets thrown at you. Like, USC is probably one of the better unranked teams in the nation. I think they're one of the best sub-500 teams in the nation. So, Colorado, you can't be sleeping on anybody. So, we'll see if Colorado can take down Stanford, but at Maple Pavilion, it's a tough place to win at. I got the Cardinal winning that, but we'll see what happens. So that's going to do it for the noteworthy matchups to watch for this weekend, and that's going to do it for Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in, and without any further delay, it's time, ladies and gentlemen, to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all very much for tuning into Set Point. I really, really do appreciate you all. If you are listening live, I greatly appreciate you. If you are listening via the playback, I appreciate you. If you are listening while watching Monday Night Football, I appreciate you. If you are listening at all, whether it's in the wee hours of the morning, whether it's here or there or anywhere, whether it's on a boat, whether it's with a ghost, I really do appreciate you. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy some volleyball action. There's a lot of volleyball going on this weekend, whether it's high school, whether it's NCAA women's volleyball, you name it. I shall see you all Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have yourselves a